St. John 10, verse 10. Are there any questions?
Watch it, baby. He's got his heavy on it.
You can see this has become a struggle between good and evil. Satan has a question.
Yes, sir, Chaplain Gill, but since neither one of us are God, I don't think either one of us are in any position to say who's good and who's evil.
Why don't you just ask your question?
We were discussing the disciples. What color were they?
I don't think we know that for certain.
But they were Hebrews, were they not?
That's right.
As was Jesus. Jesus was also a Hebrew.
Why don't you just ask your question?
What color were the original Hebrews?
I have told you that we don't know that for certain.
Then you can't believe for certain that Jesus was white.
Just a moment. God is white. Isn't it obvious?
Well, that is obvious, but we don't know if it's obvious that God is white. It's just that the images of Jesus that are on prison walls and churches throughout the world are not historically correct, because history teaches us that Jesus was born in a region where the people had color. There's proof in the very Bible that you ask us to read in Revelation's first chapter, verse 14 and 15, that Jesus had hair like wool and feet the color of brass.
Just what are you saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm proving to you that Jesus was not, and I might quote one of our Indian brothers, he was not a paleface.
Amen. Isn't that interesting?
Well, I hope the space lab is out of the way because I am just about to go into orbit. I don't have to ask who hung this here, Michael Evans, but before I hang you in its place, why?
Mama, it's just a symbol of Jesus.
Well, hello, symbol, and goodbye.
JJ paid him.
Whole thing on me, Michael. I had him in the closet. We wasn't performing no miracles for nobody.
Couldn't we at least let Black Jesus hang alongside?
Forget it. The only Jesus I know is him, and the one thing he don't need is a partner. Sasha, both of you. This picture has been in my family for as long as I can remember. When I was a baby, I don't know what I saw first. My mama, my papa, or this Jesus. Now, he's the one I know and love. So let's close the subject. Jesus was black. The Bible would have said so.
But it does say so.
What are you talking about?
I read about it it's in Revelation chapter 1, verse 14. It says, his hair is like wool. His eyes are like flame of fire.
Lord have mercy. It sure do say that, don't it?
And see, Mom, look at her hair, like wool, ain't it? And look at her eyes, red like fire.
Yeah, they sure is.
Mama, how do we know Jesus wasn't black? He could have been from the lost tribe of Israel. It was supposed to be black.
I bet they were. If ever people were lost, we're it.
Mama, how do we know Jesus wasn't black? He could have been from the lost tribe of Israel. It was supposed to be black.
I bet they were. If ever people were lost, we're it.
What you are looking at is a fresco of a beardless Christ teaching apostles in a catacomb of Domitilla, Rome, dated around 300 AD. This is one of the most ancient, if not the most ancient, depictions of Jesus Christ, or Yeshua ben Yosef, the latter being his name and not his title. With the possible exception of 2 over his left shoulder, it is clear that the people he is teaching are also black. Here is a closer look. In other parts of the world, they have no problem depicting Christ and even his mother as black.
Wrapped around him, oh yeah, sit upon the seat of justice, defending the poor and the weak and the fatherless. In my house, there's a picture on the wall, Rastafari sit up on his throne. In my house, there's a picture on the wall, Rastafari sit up on his throne. Jah ruleth all nations on the earth, oh yeah, the root of David, light of this world, oh yeah, his eyes as red as fire, my picture ain't no liar, because the whole world see I know, Rasta live forevermore.
Does it have to be there, still hanging on the wall? Does it have to be there, still hanging on the wall?
A dead man may neither be burned nor buried within the walls of the city. Such was the decree of Roman law between the 2nd and 4th century AD. This strict rule about how corpses were to be disposed of was imposed on all residents of Rome. Most Romans were pagan and preferred to be cremated. Their ashes were stored in small urns above ground. But the ancient Christians and Jews of Rome insisted on burial of their dead. Wealthy citizens had lined the roads just outside the city with family tombs. These tombs were called catacombas, which is Greek for at the hollows. The name came from the natural hollow spaces that lined the Via Appia, one of the ancient roads that led to and from Rome. Into these hollow spaces, the first Christian cemetery was built above ground. It is from these early catacombas that the catacombs of Rome evolved. More clues about these early practices come from nearby paintings.
The paintings in the catacombs give us some of our best clues to what early Christian practice really was. And you have pictures of mixed groups of people sitting around tables, drinking wine, and eating bread. And this was a very touchingly simple kind of a ceremony.
Scholars believe that this simple communal meal of the early Christians freely adopted Greek and Roman symbols and mythology for inspiration in the catacombs. Many walls depict Hercules, the great mythological hero who was famous for his courage and strength. Here, Hercules is killing the multi-headed Hydra of Lerna, which could grow 2 new heads for each one it lost. Of the Good Shepherd.
The Good Shepherd can be understood in a sense as an image of Christ that reflects if he described himself as the Good Shepherd. And the use of the Good Shepherd in the Christian catacomb is a way of depicting Christ without actually portraying him.
For example, Jonah, in the 3 basic things, he sees the whale, he gets swallowed by it, and then he's spit out into the ocean. That's a very common scene, and it is, of course, clear reference to
the biblical story of Daniel in the lion's den is represented by a nude person standing between 2 lions. The ancient Christians believed Daniel conquered this danger with prayer. Symbolic symbolic painted figures. This tomb is called the Crypt of the Coopers, so named because these ancient coopers, or barrel makers, were entombed behind a painting that depicts a group of men posed with one of their barrels. The principal Jewish catacombs are Via Torlonia to the north and Via Rondinini, which lies under the road called Via Appia Antica, site of the original catacombas burial places. Walls also depict the image of sailors buried here. Perhaps these hardy souls manned the vessel.
Moses figures very highly in the Jewish non-Christian catacombs. The scenes are gods and gods.
The Middle Ages saw the catacombs visited by the thoughtful and the destructive. But their true value as a time capsule. But who were these people? The images on the walls of Via Latina tell their story. These fragments from an ancient culture preserve for us the beliefs of a simpler time. To look upon these walls is to look deep into the past.
Joy and a kind of expectation of life in the world to come. There was an immediacy to their faith that is not to be found very often in people's religious beliefs today.
Today, the catacombs confront us with a difficult challenge: to preserve the great legacy left to us by those early believers for the next 2,000 years. It is a challenge that must be faced by all those who go in search of history.